Hello everybody, this is 𝕊𝔸𝔸𝕍𝔼 here. I'm back with another video. Thanks for tuning in today, and I'm very excited to share a couple new products with you. So first off, let's start with the brush, which is I believe the last shaving product I actually purchased, and this is the Wolfman razors, but a brush, and this is called the WRB2 shape. So he's been making brushes for a few months now, I'd say, and he has two shapes that he offers. This is the WRB2, which is kind of like a modified beehive shape, and then the WRB1 sort of looks like a doorknob, and WRB Wolfman razors brush, then the number. Took me a second to figure that out. I'm never very quick with those shortened versions of names. And so this is an aluminum brush. It has a stainless coin on the bottom. You can see the camera in the bottom there. It just says Wolfman on the bottom. And then the knot in here is a 28mm, just what they call a Maggard synthetic, which is basically a knockoff 𝔻𝔸ℕ𝔻𝔻 style knot. I believe Razor Rock calls this their 𝔻soft knot, but it's definitely in one of those, it's in that sort of genre. So I've been wanting to I wanted to get a nicer synthetic brush, because I find these days where my thrill is a little bit down, I can't be bothered to use anything difficult, and so synthetic is definitely the easiest knot to use. And anyway, I just wanted to get something nice for myself, which is to say that these brushes are definitely not cheap. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to include a link down below, if I can remember, to the brushes that are currently on the Wolfman site. You have your pick, you have your choice of knots, and as far as I know, he can kind of customize it. He'll have empty handles, and he has a certain number of knots, and you could say, I'd like that handled, you have this sort of knot, that sort of thing. So the WRB2 brush, we'll be using that today. And then secondly, another fine piece of hardware from Canada, the Karve Overlander. And I thought that the arrival of this razor was perfect, because double green here. But this razor is kindly on loan from Dave in Kentucky. Dave has a pretty extensive YouTube channel where he goes through and documents mostly kind of vintage razors, and that's how we first connected. When I was in sort of the peak of my vintage razor thrill, we would talk about certain things, and we've exchanged some things over the years. But I left a comment on his most recent video where he used Coffee and Contemplation, which I reviewed in my last video, and I expressed a little bit of interest in trying this razor at some point. And he said, hey, why don't I send it over to you and you can try it out. So this is also aluminum, and this is the Knopf handle, which is a German word. I checked with some reputable sources, and it does mean like a knob, like a doorknob, but it can also mean like a button, like you push a button, or like a button on your shirt. And so I think this handle is really very cool. I love the the sort of knurling, but just the whole design aesthetic. It just looks very well made. And as far as I know, this razor was mainly meant to be a easier angle to find than the Carve Christopher Bradley here. This is the aluminum one that I have, which is to say that that razor, the Christopher Bradley, requires you to ride the cap more, right? But with this Overlander, you can do a more normal shaving angle, let's say. These are the top cap and base plate separated, and I'm going to go ahead and load up a blade. Let's use let me get it the right way, a Polsilver Super Iridium Extra Stainless today. And if I had the right part, that would probably be good. So once again, thanks very much to Dave for loaning this to me. Something to note is that the end tabs are covered for this razor. For the Christopher Bradley, you get to choose whether you want those tabs covered or not. And wow, that assembles together beautifully. Absolutely no tension or difficulty with the threading or anything like that. and just a very well made razor. I've always thought that Carve made razors well, and I'm happy to be trying this new one from them. Okay, finally, the last thing. What are we using for the soap? Well, as some of you know, I've been using this coconut cow cream pretty exclusively over the past couple months, and we have finally made it to that point. Nothing left except for this amount that I've got in my bowl here. So let's go ahead and start working that up. I'm just wetting the brush through. Again, I'd like to thank the person that gifted me the soap when he did the initial small batch of it. This now makes the second Shave Dandy soap cream that I've completed, and I do feel that I deserve some sort of prize for this because as far as I know, I don't think there's anyone else who's finished 2 Shave Dandy products, let alone 1. Even the maker himself, I don't know if he's finished one of his own products. So we've gotten to about this point. Let's add some water. With this soap, I noticed that if you add too much water, like right at the very beginning, it can get a little bubbly, frothy, and it's a little difficult to save, though not impossible to save. But if you just add water a little more gradually, I think it does better for the cream. It can take a lot of water. You just have to be a little bit careful about how you add it. Again, at least with the way that I build a lather and, you know, my water content and all that sort of stuff. The cream did actually turn back into more of a cream near the end of its life. When it was first given to me new, it was sort of like a whipped sort of deal. Like you couldn't squeeze it out of a tube, but you could scoop it out with your finger easily. And then somewhere in the middle, it got very firm. Wasn't sure if that's because I left the lid off too long one day and it got quite firm. But then near the end, it did get quite soft again and certainly resembled more of a cream than a soap. Okay, so we're going to start with this here. Let's get some water on the face, some warm water. And let's lather up with the WRB2. All things considered, I've been pretty happy with this Maggard knot. There are certainly new, fancier, shinier synthetic knots that you can pick out, but I've never had much of an issue working with kind of the basic ones. Of course, these are all originally made in China, and you know the Maggard aspect of it, it's just a rebranding. You could get the same knot directly from China if you know what you're doing, or you could get it from another retailer in your country. But I just always like the convenience of being able to buy it directly from Maggard. And so anyway, like I was saying, there are some fancier synthetic knots you can get these days, but I've never had an issue with the Timberwolf. That was kind of my favorite one for a while. And then this one's been pretty good too. So to talk about the brush cost a little bit, at the time of this recording, I did a little cost comparison with the Wald brushes out of Germany, Wald. And if you take one of their synthetic brushes and you compare it to one of these with a knot, they're about the same. Just to say, I believe the Wald brushes are around $250 US, and these are about 3 something Canadian, and that translates to about $250 US. And so when I was talking to James, the owner of Wolfman, I said, you know, what goes into the cost of this brush, making it basically? And the way he described it to me, which makes perfect sense, is that a lot of it has to do with sort of the opportunity cost of using the shop machines and also his workers to make these brushes instead of razors. So part of it was he didn't want to become Wolfman brushes, he wanted to stay Wolfman razors, but it's also the thing of if he sells, he wanted to price them in a way that he wouldn't be selling too many of them. He expressed to me that he doesn't mind that he's not selling these off the shelves. Just wanted to kind of provide an option for people who had been asking about hardware, or maybe something he decided to do himself. I will say that I think this modified beehive shape, as I get lather all over it, is very cool and has been pretty functional in my testing. So anyway, that's sort of a little bit of perspective. You know, you have to think that he doesn't have a bunch of machines and a bunch of workers to make the stuff that he's selling, right? So there is a opportunity cost involved in choosing to make one thing instead of another. Right, I'm going to keep building up my face lather and bring you back here when I'm about to start my first pass with the Karve Overlander. Okay, we're back, and this is our first pass lather result. That's difficult to say. Happy with it? Let's do the first pass with the Karve Overlander. And here we go. That feels about right. So there's a period in my shaving career where I was using a lot of vintage razors, particularly the gem single edge, and those razors really require you to ride the cap or else you will not have a good time. So we're dealing with 2 days growth today, by the way, as usual. So back then I didn't mind to ride the cap with, you know, all the razors I was using basically. But in recent years, I've gotten more into just setting the razor basically flat and then tilting slightly. So more like riding the safety bar, the guard. So the idea that Carve made a razor that you didn't have to ride the cap with as much definitely interested me. My initial impressions of this razor are very good. It kind of feels like the blade clamping feels fantastic. It kind of reminds me of using a single edge that has sort of a thicker blade and gives you a different kind of cutting sensation. It feels very precise. The only thing I'm a little worried about is I wonder if I'm going to have some irritation at the end because I'm just, you know, sort of trying to figure out the angle still, and so I wonder if it's more, it's not as forgiving as it lets on. We'll see. I think the aggression on paper is somewhere near like a B plate. Because there's only one plate option, you want to make something that's not, it's got to please as many people as possible, right? Okay, first pass done. I'll rinse and come back in for pass number 2 in just a moment. Pass number 2. So if your brush gets like this, meaning a bunch of soap, lather all over it, and you're worried about it, just grab a towel and you can wipe some of that off. I wouldn't say this shape and brush, they're not inherently slippery or difficult to hold, but if if you get a bunch of slick lather on the handle, then I think just about any handle is going to be pretty slick. So, okay, here we go. Second pass with the Overlander. We'll go across the grain mostly. How's the weather where you are? Here we've had beautiful, beautiful weather. Like, really can't complain. It was even, I think it got up to maybe 90 yesterday, which is always an oddity for this area. But it seems like Mother Nature's trying to give us one good last glimpse of summer before we go into fall, which is probably my favorite season here. Usually fall is pretty consistent here, which is to say that spring is not at all. Like this year, for example, I didn't feel like it was just very up and down for a while. And I guess it was up and down, and then I guess you could call it spring because it took a long time to really warm up, like get above 70 consistently. That took quite some time. Yeah. And in alignment with this weather and back to school season and changing of the seasons, all that stuff, this does happen to be my busiest time of year professionally. Lots of people want music this time of year, whether it's for a wedding or doing a lot of festival gigs these days. But this weekend and next weekend are going to be the busiest weekends I've had in a long time, maybe ever. And happy to say too that I'm going to be compensated as such, which feels good because, going into winter, not as much of those performance opportunities. Okay, second pass, all good. Let's rinse and come back for final pass number 3. Okay, here's the third and final pass with coconut cow cream. Here we go. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. I think the lather dried up a little bit in the brush. I had to make sure that it was properly hydrated here for the third and final pass against the grain mostly. So we'll see how this razor does. I am super impressed with this razor. It just feels like a better version of everything I've tried in the Christopher Bradley lineup. I've tried several different plates, and then as my travel razor, I ended up with this, which is the B plate. But even though it's mild, and maybe it's just because I only use it when I'm traveling, and so, the variables are different when you're traveling versus when you're shaving at home. But despite its mild nature, I've had some rough shaves on the road with that B plate, whereas there doesn't really nothing feels rough about this razor. So, very impressed. I'm going to continue to use it for a few more days since this is just a kind of first impressions thing. I'm going to keep using it for a little bit and see how my thoughts develop. Thanks again to Dave for sending this my way. Speaking of, I almost forgot to mention that my podcast with 𝔻𝔸𝔻𝔻 on his Lather Talk podcast, just posted yesterday. If I can remember, I'll include a link to that down in the description. Of course, you can find it on your favorite podcast streaming deal platform. But we did record some video, so I'll include the link to that. That was a really nice interview. I call it an interview because it was just the two of us, and we did that. That was back in June, the listeners of the podcast had some questions to ask me about sort of my music career and things like that. And so that's why I say it felt more like an interview, and that, people came prepared with some questions. But John was a really easy guy to talk with. We've bonded over music since the beginning, because I know that he plays at least a little classical piano. So it felt very natural to talk with him. We talked for a long time, maybe almost 2 hours, I want to say. But John did a great job with the editing, and he cut it down to just over 60 minutes, which, let me tell you, the editing of those things can be quite difficult and time consuming. So, and I think the edit turned out great. I agreed with all of his choices of the things that he cut that I could remember saying anyway, but didn't make it. So check that out if you'd like. Again, we talk a good bit about shaving, but also there's some things I mentioned about my time with music, and yeah. Wow, this is a really impressive first shave with this razor. Of course, it's a little easier than what my shaves will typically be, because I'm shaving off 2 days growth, whereas normally I shave 1 day's growth. But that's a really impressive first shave from this razor here, the Karve Overlander. The nice thing now is you can, I don't know if it was this way originally, but you can pick whatever kind of handle you want with the head. Before, I had the impression that you had to buy this 𝔻𝔸𝔻𝔻 separately, handle sold separately. But now it seems like you can do it all at once, and it's about 125 Canadian, which is a little under 100 US. So anyway, wow, very, very impressed with that. I'm at a loss for words. So I'm going to do my final rinse and come back and talk to you over post-shave. Stay tuned. Okay, we're back, and I must say, just one more time, that was a really good shave. Not one nick. Doesn't seem like there's any irritation. I don't feel any heat, anything like that. So great. I was talking with the man behind Shave Dandy, and I said, hey, I'm going to be using the cream for one last time before it's gone. What sort of aftershave do you think I should use? And it was a funny game of, he said, well, I don't know, what do you have? And then I sort of perused what I had, sent him one name at a time, and he would say, no, this, no. And eventually we landed on Aqua Velva Ice Blue, because I know that's something that he likes. And this is a vintage version of it, or at least neo-vintage, and it's in this Avon Spark Plug decanter. Shout out to Patrick, if you're watching, who gifted me this at least a year or two ago now. So here we go. The aftershave is blue, but there's no restrictor on this, so I have to be careful with how much I douse out. And here we go. I do really enjoy this scent from time to time. It's like it's a 𝔻𝔸𝔻𝔻 of some sort, technically. And from what I can tell, the vintage version does smell better than the modern version. Of course, that's what you're going to say, right? The older version's better. Yeah, there's a little bit of menthol in this, so that's really nice. vintage Aqua Velva Ice Blue. Okay, final rundown. We finished off coconut, cow cream. Goodbye, sweet friend. It was a good run. I mean, I really had a good time with that cream. These days, I find it better for my shaving mental health if I stick to one soap and try to work on it. The Karve Overlander, super impressed. More to come with this. Maybe I'll get in one more video before I send it back to Dave, or maybe Dave will sell it to me. We'll see. Kind of doubt. Okay, and the Wolfman WRB2 with the Maggard synthetic. Very happy with this brush. This has been fun to use, and proud to have that as my go-to synthetic. Thank you all so much. If you made it this far, feel free to leave me any comments, questions, and of course, I take requests. I take suggestions. I like being able to say something I say in the music world on YouTube shaving, saying I take requests. Okay, thank you all. Take care. This has been 𝔻𝔸ℍ𝔻𝔻𝔻, and we'll see you next time. Bye.